Thank you guys for being here. I'm Matt. I'm the head of community at Lawtrades. If you don't know Lawtrades, we are a legal tech company that provides staffing solutions to really busy in-house departments, paralegals, attorneys, legal operations professionals, contract managers, what have you, on a very flexible, on-demand basis. I am very excited to give this talk, or to moderate this talk. This is an awesome subject, an innovative subject. We're talking about cannabis. And I have two tremendous speakers, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves and give their background. But you'll see why I have imposter syndrome whenever I have a discussion with these folks. So, Nicole, if you don't mind giving just a bit of your background and how you got into cannabis.
Sure. Nicole Staton. I am General Counsel for Trulieve Cannabis Corporation. I have been with Trulieve for a little over a year. Prior to that, I was the General Counsel at Harvest Health and Recreation, who, of course, was acquired by Trulieve about a year ago. So I was part of that team that helped with that merger, the largest merger of cannabis companies at the time, $2.1 billion. And so that was very exciting. I came to cannabis in 2019 after almost 20 years in private practice at a national law firm doing litigation. My practice there was professional liability defense primarily, so I had not had previous exposure to cannabis before I came into Harvest in 2019. I came into the industry because I was looking for intellectual stimulation and excitement, and it has been everything I hoped for and more with regard to that. So it's a fun industry, and I look forward to chatting about it here today.
That's awesome. And Charles, what about your background and how you got into cannabis?
Absolutely, Matt. Thanks for having me today. My background was as a criminal defense attorney in New York City. I was building my my own practice there, and as I was building that practice, I started networking in various organizations, including the New York City Bar Association and the Normal Legal Committee. And both of these organizations had, all these different lawyers who had been involved in the cannabis reform movement for a long time. And, as Nicole said, intellectual stimulation is sometimes hard to find as an attorney, right? And I found that environment was just, incredibly intellectually stimulating for me. I recognized that my future was likely not in criminal law. I was very comfortable dealing with marijuana, having represented individuals charged with marijuana crimes. So, I moved to Colorado in late 2013 after meeting some lawyers that really got me interested in the space at the Normal Legal Conference in Aspen, and from there it's pretty much been a whirlwind. I've done a lot of consulting in the business. I also, have worked with Greencare Collective, which is a vertically integrated business here in Massachusetts. I've been with the company since its inception, and I'm currently the GC. And I'm really excited for this talk. I go to a lot of cannabis networking events, so I love talking about cannabis to non-cannabis attorneys, so to speak, because I think it's a really exciting area of practice.
That's fantastic. And I think everyone watching agrees, because there's plenty of folks watching that want to get into the cannabis space and don't know how. I think I'm going to take a step back for a minute, because I think we all, because I'm a former in-house attorney as well, share a similar fact. And it's, we all were litigators at one point and became in-house attorneys, probably working on a number of transactional matters. I'll ask you guys that. Was that a hard transition? Was it an easy transition to go in-house as litigators? I know this is a bit off from the cannabis, but this is selfish of me. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. And Nicole,
Yeah, I'll go first. I was told when I was a summer associate that I should be a transactional lawyer by a person who ended up being a friend of mine, a former colleague, and I went down the litigation path. I was very fortunate when I came into Harvest that they had a strong team already in place of corporate transactional lawyers. A lawyer on my team that is still with us, who has probably worked on more cannabis M&A deals than just about anybody. So I was blessed to have him as part of my team. So it really filled kind of that deficiency. I think I would have had more challenge had I not had another member on my team, quite honestly. But having gone through the Harvest Trulieve merger and fully participating in that process, I can affirmatively say that I wish that I would have gone down that route as opposed to litigation, because it was very rewarding at the end of the transaction to see what we had accomplished. I feel like as litigators, nobody really wants to spend time with you. Nobody wants to be in a lawsuit. And so I felt like I did one jury trial as part of my practice, and I of course settled a bunch of cases, and that's very gratifying, but it wasn't the same as working on a deal. So I can fully understand how people become deal junkies. And I would, like I said, I think I would have struggled if I would not have had somebody on my team who was very well equipped to do this.
I feel that tremendously. There's nothing more gratifying than closing a deal, as opposed to, as we all know, like someone calls and says, I'm getting sued, or Charles, right? Like I've been arrested by the police. I need your help. So Charles, what about you? Like, you are a true criminal defense attorney, a litigator, and you went in-house. Like, what was that transition like?
I think for me, that transition was kind of buffered by having been in the consulting business in the interim, and that exposure to the same things that Nicole was talking about, right? Just the kind of cadence of how you would close an acquisition in the cannabis industry, right? Like that, whatever you want to call it, jargon or cadence, I think is often what at least in-house people are looking to you for, right? If you're closing one of these large mergers, I mean, you probably have, two different outside. In Harvest Trulieve, I don't even want to reckon. That's like one of those, civil cases where you'd walk into the courthouse and you'd wonder who all those people were, and they were all representing, different insurance companies, right? So I think, look, you have to have strong outside counsel, but you also have to have some familiarity with those deals. And I'm fortunate that our C-suite is very experienced in M&A in general, and that that type of experience is generally translatable. But I think I think we'll get into it more later. But what ties into that a little bit is the lack of precedent in these deals, right? And some of the issues, some of the things that you have to do just to get one of these deals done, the divestiture, the really just like paring out of all these assets. So I think, just understanding the space well, I think is very, worthwhile for that transition as well. But I agree with Nicole. I think you really have to have, a strong background in that, whether it's in-house, on your team or outside counsel who's done, could do these deals, in their sleep.
I'll echo everything here. I had really good outside counsel who baby stepped me into some of these deals. And Nicole, to your point, like once you deal with a deal of a certain size, you're like, I got this. Like, I understand it. I'll be okay. Especially as litigators, where all of us are thrown in the fire for the most part. I think that's just an aspect of being in that kind of space where you pick things up very quickly, I think it's just like training. Like, you have to pick it up very quickly. So I think that's awesome. All right, guys. So let me ask you this: in cannabis, me being naive, I don't even know what lawyers are doing, right? Like, am I a real estate attorney? Am I an agricultural attorney? What kind of law are you dealing with on like a day-to-day basis? And Nicole, do you want to start?
Sure. I mean, I always chuckle when someone says I'm a cannabis lawyer, because I see Charles smiling. I don't think that exists. Whatever that is, I'm not really sure. But what I do know is that all of the above, Matt, to what you just said, I mean, you do need to be good at whatever it is that you do, be it litigation, real estate, M&A, finance, securities, whatever it is. Those are the lawyers that are bringing their skills to this practice, and trying to be the best, whatever that is out there, because it touches on all of those things. Because most of the large MSOs, which I work for, of course, are vertically integrated. You are doing agricultural, you're doing manufacturing, you're doing retail facing, which involves a whole nother array of issues. And so you do have to be good at a lot of different things, or surround yourself with people that, you know, are more specialized in those various areas. So all of the above, and just being the best at whatever it is that you do.
Yeah, I often chuckle when people say cannabis attorney, because to me that just means they're an attorney who likes cannabis, and there happen to be a lot of those, whether or not they practice in this area or not. But I don't think that question is specific to cannabis, right? You need to have the same skill set you would have as any GC, and I think that's the real point, is that no longer are there these firms that are promoting themselves as cannabis attorneys. There are some, and they become, they're more subject matter experts than cannabis attorneys, right? So what those firms that call themselves cannabis attorneys are, they're operational compliance experts. They're, deal structuring experts in cannabis, but you need all of the, same elements that you need in any company. I mean, in terms of some of the MSOs, you have thousands of employees. I mean, it's a large company. You need to have a sound legal team in every area. But it's I think what's really interesting about working in-house, especially being on site in a facility, often is it's not the same thing every day. It's very different. They're very novel issues that you're thinking about. You have to really read between the lines, I think, in a lot of ways, of these regulations. You have to understand what legislative intent is of the regulations, what the enforcement environment is. So I think even in an area like compliance, what people would think would be very cut and dry, right? Here are the rules, you just have to follow them. I think it's there's a lot of nuance there. So it's really just kind of taking, I think being in some ways being a cannabis attorney is taking all of these kind of disparate areas of a law that you have in any way as a GC, and then looking at them through this very very unique lens that is the practice in cannabis.
That makes a lot of sense to me. It's because it is such an innovative practice. And I imagine both of y'all are dealing with such an array of regulatory, I guess, I don't want to say regulatory nightmare, but like there's so many different states that have their own regulatory regimes. And then you have the federal regulatory regime, which is constantly in flux, as we saw with Biden's, I think it was an executive order fairly recently on cannabis. So I'll ask you guys this. I imagine you're dealing with a lot of, Charles, you just kind of referenced this, like unprecedented things. I guess, what do you tend to do in these circumstances as a general counsel of a cannabis company? And whoever wants to start, Charles or Nicole.
I'll go ahead and start. I mean, I think Charles nailed it when he said there's a lot of issues of first impression and a lot of precedent setting things. I know that in the Harvest Trulieve merger, we did encounter, first of all, I don't think many people thought we would close that deal as quickly as we did. And we did encounter one regulatory issue that presented a stumbling block to the entire deal. It was one license in one particular state. And we had to work with the regulator to come up with a plan on how to handle that. It had never been done before. When we submitted our proposed solution to the problem that would have held up the entire deal, we honestly didn't know if it was going to work. It had never been done before. So that's the type of thing that we do on a daily basis, is deal with things that have never been done before. Because from state to state, as Charles mentioned, things are handled differently. And it's even a different mindset, because we're not necessarily regulated by a Department of Health in every state. Sometimes we're regulated by a Department of Commerce, for example. That's a different brain than it is to be regulated by the Department of Health. And so just coming at it with that kind of unique perspective in each different state, it's like kind of like reinventing the wheel almost every time. And there are a lot of issues that just have never been dealt with before. And so that's one of the things that I love about it. I'm sure Charles does too, is that it's never a dull day. and to be able to develop solutions to problems like that, where somebody hasn't given you a cookie cutter and said, cut it out like this, is what makes it really exciting and rewarding.
That's so cool. Charles, I would imagine you probably have similar thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, there's always unprecedented issues. There really is no precedent. So I think the question is more about, which of those issues do you happen to be attacking that day? And I think you have to have a really solid team to do that, right? You really have to bounce these ideas off of it. You have to have business people who are flexible as well, right? Most business people are used to their, counsel or the outside counsel's word being, gospel, so to speak. They're like, okay, what do you do in this situation? Like, oh, well, you do this, this, and this. Or actually, you could do this, this, and this. And if the facts were a little bit different, right? That's not really the case. You sit down and the ops people tell you what they want to do, and you say, well, and you kind of have this. In some ways, you have this Venn diagram, right? You have people who really understand the operations of cannabis, and you have people who really understand the business of cannabis on the other side. Very few people are, able to bridge that common ground. And I think a good GC in the space is kind of always tasked with that, mainly because you're always bringing, the ops people back to the regulations and saying, wait a second, like, let's think about what the cones are. But at the same time, you really have to understand the business itself from an operational perspective, as well as from financial and corporate perspective. So I think bringing that lens to that type of Venn diagram is really how you deal with those unprecedented issues.
Oh, absolutely. Nicole, I think I might have just cut you off.
Nope, you didn't.
Well, I got a question for you, and it kind of stems from the value of local counsel. It sounds like for y'all, local counsel plays a very big part in what y'all do, right? I think, Nicole, especially for you, where you're in multiple states and potentially other countries, maybe?
Nope, just here.
Not yet.
Don't do that, please. Thank you.
From multiple jurisdictions in the United States. I'll ask that. Are you leaning on local counsel? But let me start with that question. I feel like I'm still a litigator. I ask these compound questions, which I'm going to just strike. Do you lean on local counsel a bit for understanding these regulations and moving forward in some of these jurisdictions?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just like I would as a litigator who, maybe has a case in another jurisdiction, the same is true here, because they potentially know the regulator. They've been to, conferences or have met them at industry meetings, and they kind of know the mindset. They know what their predisposition is going to be. They have other clients in that jurisdiction. So absolutely. I mean, you want to find someone that isn't just a good lawyer, but also has a relationship with those folks. I alluded to the stumbling block issue we had in the Trulieve Harvest acquisition that was going to potentially delay the entire deal by about 6 months. Having local counsel who could pick up the phone and talk with the regulator about various ideas about how we could get through this in a way that complied with the regulations, but still accomplish the business objectives, that's huge. And, they are now our go-to counsel in that jurisdiction, because we recognized that they had a very good relationship with the regulator and could make that call.
Absolutely.
And take that temperature.
Exactly. And Charles, that's kind of like what you were doing, right? You said you were a consultant. I would imagine that you kind of fit that role even before becoming a GC, understanding the regulations, working with the regulator, and being sure you're a cannabis lawyer, but you're also really a regulatory attorney and a government affairs attorney. Is that right?
Absolutely. That's, I was a consultant before I went in-house, and that's what I was doing. I was doing, I wasn't acting as an attorney for them, right? But I was doing the work that people often hire an attorney to do, but it's not required, appearing before local entitlement boards, meeting with mayors and, local selectmen here in Massachusetts. So I think, the real value of Nicole hit hit it on the head right there. With the real value of local counsel is that that network, right? And I think that's a really valuable thing in the industry in general, right? Is having that network, because these issues are unprecedented and they depend on, having the ability to call the regulator or call someone else. Like, I think a really valuable resource for GCs and compliance officers in this space is having a network of compliance officers in that state that they can call, that they trust, that they can speak to at a high level, and just have someone to bounce those ideas off of. Although I do think there is some danger, and I see this sometimes in creating a standard of compliance that's above the regulator, right? Like a lot of these these firms, and that Nicole's referencing, they have 30-40% market share in some of these markets, and then they create this level of compliance that, yes, it's compliant, but it's not always operationally efficient, right? Because they almost have this super regulator in their mind, because regulatory work from the government's perspective is a subjective area. There is a lot of deference to the individual investigators, so they kind of combine all of these individual and get investigators, and then they create. So I think you have to be very careful. For us, it's different, right? We only operate in one state, so we do have local counsel. We're trying to entitle another retail location, so we have local counsel there in that particular jurisdiction. I think our counsel there is invaluable to our entitlement process, just for having that local information. But again, I think it's that network of people, and it's like to echo what we said before, whether that comes from outside counsel, whether that comes from someone within your organization, it's having this network and team that you would have really as any GC, but just filling in the gaps from different places, because this is a newer area of law.
Absolutely. I've got a question from the audience I wanted to ask everybody. It's a little off, but so the person's asking, is it necessary to live in some of these areas like New York or Colorado or California to get into the cannabis space? I know everyone's nodding their head no, because I think, Nicole, you're in Arizona, Charles, you're in Boston, right? So I'd love for all of you to speak to it, if you don't mind. And Nicole, if you want to start.
Yeah, I live in Arizona. Trulieve is in Florida. So I don't think it matters where you are necessarily. I think you have to build, as you were talking about earlier, you have to build kind of networks of people that can help you in various jurisdictions. But I don't think it's required. I mean, we've been working remotely for over 2 years now. So I think that's totally doable.
Yeah, Charles.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the one of the great things about cannabis reform and the progress that it's made is there are fewer and fewer states where there isn't some form of legalized cannabis. I think it's 36 or 37 states have either medical or adult use programs. So I would agree. I think working remotely is can work very well. People using a platform like yours, I don't think you would obviously not have to work in those jurisdictions, depending upon what you're doing. There are ethical implications to that, but I think someone starting off, I think it's a lot easier when you're not interacting with people the way we're interacting, right? In order to really create those trusted members within those networks, you have to have those face-to-face conversations. So I think it can be done, but it's probably easier to break in somewhere where there is a more mature industry.
Sure. Thanks for the plug for Lawtrades. Appreciate that. So
you didn't pay me for that. That was just came to mind. Yeah.
Thank you. So thank you guys for that response. I got a question for everybody here, and it's, what challenges did you not anticipate but you ran into in the industry that really caught you off guard? I'll ask that. Charles, do you want to start?
Sure. I think, growing these businesses grow extremely quickly, right? I think groups talk about cannabis years in the same vein of, dog years, right? So, if you've been working in the industry for 10 years, it's like you've been working in it for 25 or 30. And I think given the challenges in the industry that are predictable, right? The lack of banking, the fact that you can't just walk into a bank and say, "Hey, I have this much product. I'm looking for this much inventory. I'm looking for a line of credit like that. I'd like to extend terms to my customers." Right? All of these challenges that you face every day, I think it can really exacerbate the challenges that any startup companies face by, just the, extremely, exponential and a fast growth pace, right? So I think the challenges are predictable, right? This is federally illegal. Most lawyers can figure out, what the implications of that are to other areas of law, but it's that next step, that really is when you take all that and then you look at it, combine that with just the pace and from an economic perspective, the lack of information in the marketplace, right? Like most economists would love perfect information to make sound economic decisions. We don't have that, and furthermore, we have all these artificial kind of impediments that are created by these disparate regulations. Like, for example, in Massachusetts, you can't have more than 3 retail licenses. Well, truly, I don't know how many dispensaries you have now in Florida, Nicole, but I mean, it's, many, many times that. It's hundreds, right? So I think that difference. So then how could you possibly look at the Florida and Massachusetts markets in the same way? And therefore people take the lessons from other states and try to apply them. But that kind of hyper locality, I think, is really, really challenging from a market analysis perspective.
You can only have 3 retail locations in Massachusetts?
Yes.
Anyways, I think my
yeah.
Anyways, Nicole.
Yeah, I probably couldn't have said it better than Charles just did. I mean, he touched on banking. I mean, certainly that creates a whole host of challenges, for our employees, including, we've had employees denied the ability to get mortgages because they're employed by a cannabis company and the bank figures out they're employed by a cannabis company. So that it's things like that people are like, their head just blows up when you tell them that, because they understand it's federally illegal. They understand we can't use federal banks essentially, but they don't connect it to the people that those types of laws impact. They have, 280E, yada, 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 but they don't connect it with the people and how it impacts the people that work for us. And that's a very real example.
I didn't know that either. That no kidding. That just blew my mind. Yep. And I guess that makes sense. That's crazy. I'm sorry. I'm riling from it myself. and that's a really fair point. I would assume that's, I guess most of these issues, outside of the fact that each state, as we talked about, each state has its own little regulatory regime, but yes, the federal v state issue, I imagine is I don't say it's torture, but I imagine it causes a lot of stress, legal stress for everyone here. I think it's probably fair to say.
I do think that is fair to say, and I do think that one of the major benefits, of course, to what the president announced a few weeks ago with regard to his intentions would be creating a more consistent system across the country, because it for companies like us who are in different states, the challenges that Charles described are, just with the very disparate frameworks everywhere, present a lot of challenges. And in a state like, Massachusetts or some other place where there is a cap, I do think that it presents challenges with regard to the very business nature that companies have to follow in terms of being able to even be profitable in a market like that. This is an expensive, I'm sure Charles will agree, it's an expensive endeavor to set up a grow, to process, and to only be able to serve 3 retail locations.
I can only imagine. I remember when Florida created their regulation for it when it was first legalized. For medically, and I remember folks coming in, out of state players, and it was such a mess. I guess I feel for everyone here. It was such a mess because the regulations weren't exactly clear. They weren't the same as, say, California, say Nevada, say Colorado, and it's dealing with that as well as dealing with the federal level. I imagine, again, it keeps us employed, keeps everyone on this employed. You always need lawyers.
Yeah. I think that point, just to piggyback off that a bit, I think that's absolutely right. And that point is actually the biggest obstacle to, whatever your version of federal legalization is. I think that we're describing the biggest obstacle, which is marrying all of those disparate rules into some type of uniform regulation. And we're not even really in the weeds of it, right? I mean, if you talked about testing, that's, varies in every jurisdiction. Massachusetts has some of the strictest microbiological restrictions. So people are, have these visions of there being interstate commerce and, cannabis coming from other states. Well, it's not coming from another state if it doesn't meet the testing requirements that are required in that state. And without that real lack of uniform regulations, I think it is challenging from a national landscape, but it also creates opportunity for businesses like Greencare and like Trulieve, right? Trulieve wasn't, Trulieve started in one state, right? And it's different from most of the MSOs because it's focused in that one state and has a tremendous market share in that state, unlike so I think it's important to recognize kind of where businesses are and where they're going and how realistic some of the larger concepts that people are talking about are. Nicole mentioned President Biden's announcement, and you dig a little further into the actual effect of that, and I think it's represents progress, but I think it's very clear that the intent of it, or the effect of it, I should say, is not really all that effective. I mean, it would make a whole lot more sense to just pardon people who were actually in prison, right? That might be helpful rather than people who the president admittedly said in his own press release that this no one who was actually in prison would be affected by it, which pretty much everyone already knew who actually followed the issue, because very few people get arrested for simple possession of marijuana by the federal government.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I have a question from the audience I wanted to ask you guys. I thought it was a pretty good question. So do growing cannabis companies generally see the importance of growing an in-house, I feel like this is a pun, growing an in-house legal team, or do they typically rely on outside counsel? Said differently, do you foresee an increased amount of in-house jobs for lawyers in the cannabis space? Nicole?
I mean, obviously it depends on the company. I would say that when I joined Harvest, we actually created what I kind of affectionately referred to as our own little miniature law firm. And so right now, we do have a real estate lawyer. We have a labor and employment lawyer. I am the litigator. I have a corporate M&A counsel. And then I have someone who reviews contracts. And does IP work as well. And so I do think that it depends on the company. It depends on whether they want to create an in-house department. I see the value in doing that. None of the lawyers on our team, nobody has less than 12 years of experience. So we're a little bit different than a law firm in that we don't have that leverage with partners and associates. I think the work that we do is complicated enough that it does take experience. As I mentioned before, We don't hire cannabis lawyers. We hire lawyers that are good at what they do, and did create kind of this mini law firm environment. It doesn't mean that we still don't rely on outside counsel, because things do come up from time to time that we're not experts in. For example, just had to retain labor counsel for union related issues. And so, while we have a labor and employment person on our team, they're more in the employment area. Labor is its whole nother area when you're dealing with the NLRB. So ours is kind of a blend of internal and external resources.
Yeah, I think it really just depends upon the size of the company, right? That Nicole has their department. Our department at GC is just me, right? And or the GC at GC, right? Like that's we rely on outside counsel for a lot of the legal work, and then the operational side is more compliance related, right? So I think smaller companies, you'll find that you have just a smaller department, and many of the smaller firms do not have in-house counsel, and I think it's a big mistake. People hire lawyers to help them through the regulatory process, but then when they actually have to implement the things they said they were going to do in that process, they say, "Oh no, we're all set now," right? I think relying on outside counsel is really challenging, because it's challenging for outside counsel to look at your business holistically, and in order to make these decisions and be nimble, you have to be able to do that. So to answer the question, I do foresee an increase in-house jobs for lawyers in the space, and especially for more junior lawyers, right? I think if people are in-house, they're often much more senior attorneys. So I think as the companies grow, as there's more consolidation, you'll have basically what Nicole described. You'll have those kind of in-house law firms, and you'll have it throughout the workforce.
Absolutely. That's I couldn't agree more with everyone here. I think as the industry grows, you will see much more. Nicole, your model makes the most sense as well. Like everyone's there. If you need outside counsel, it's because you're right. There's something that's just very nuanced or local, like we've discussed. So I agree with the points here. So guys,
ginormous, Matt. Like a big acquisition or something like that.
Listen, I think it's the coolest thing ever to have like a legal department and everyone is truly a subject matter. Because when I was in-house, I was in the government and I was in a company, and it was just like a generalist. So like I'm like running around like, yeah, I could do that. And then Charles, probably what you're in right now, where it's like not necessarily putting out fires, but having to be nimble, right? Having to figure things out kind of on the go, but also really knowing a little bit about everything, and then utilizing outside counsel when you can. So I think it agrees as like more older companies, more mature companies, as they get bigger, you start to create this like law firm model within the company. So I agree with everyone here. So question for everyone: what is the industry going to look like over the next couple of years? What are your thoughts? I'd love to hear it. Nicole, if you want to start.
Well, I wish I had a crystal ball so that I could anticipate what that is going to look like. I think that, certainly what the president said a couple of weeks ago is potentially a game changer for everyone. Although we've been talking about safe banking and things like that for years. And so it's going to depend, Matt. I mean, I can't stress enough how significant of a statement that is, but the devil's in the details about what that looks like. Is it scheduling, putting cannabis on a different schedule? Is it descheduling it altogether? Who is regulating us? If it's taken off a schedule, we don't know what that's going to look like. If I knew that, I would probably not be on this phone call. I'd be doing something in anticipation of all of those changes, which are bound to be many, I think. But we just don't know. And I think we will be ready only because Charles knows this. We are all if you survive in this industry for more than a short period of time, you have that flexibility and that adaptability to be able to maneuver through any change. We do that on a daily basis. So is this change going to be significant? Yes. But I think the people who have stuck around for a reasonable period of time, we're used to change. It will be another change, maybe big, but we know how to adapt. So I don't know what it's going to look like. I hope it looks good. That's all I can say. I hope the changes are positive for us, but I'd be lying to you if I told you that I knew.
Fair.
I couldn't agree more. I think people talk about federal legalization, and in my mind, that's not even really like a concrete topic to talk about because we're so far from there. Even the monumental announcement is an announcement that has no real effect. And I think this is emblematic of the government's policy towards cannabis. It's just not that well thought out. And as we've touched on all these different topics, you begin to realize that in order for it to work, it has to be pretty well thought out. And I think that's where hopefully where I hope it will be better thought out, right? And think about regulations that are that will make the businesses economically viable, reforming tax policy that is just, completely outdated and being applied to groups of people that it wasn't intended to be applied to. All of those different issues. I think from a consumer perspective, the market will look much more like the craft beer market that we see here in the U.S. that has been booming, right? What we see from just from an economic perspective is you have price compression in some of these more mature states, but what you really have is a widening of the price point, right? There's cannabis that's less expensive, that's a lower quality, and then there's more expensive cannabis that's a higher quality, and that that differentiation, I think, is what we're seeing, and what we'll continue to see as the markets mature and as you remove these artificial impediments, right? Having a more comprehensive set of regulations will hopefully lead to more predictability for the industry so that you can make sound business decisions and not have to, do what Nicole described and just kind of make them on the fly and have to be so nimble. I think the industry would benefit from groups being able to plan for 36 months, right? Like any other business. I don't think you can really do that well in cannabis.
Yeah. Well, and Matt, just to build upon what Charles just said, I mean, obviously people in the industry will benefit that, but flowing from that, consumers benefit, patients benefit, anybody who's using our products benefits from our ability to plan and have predictability, which, again, we have this potential tidal wave disruption, maybe not. It's important for the end user, not just for us.
I agree. And I have to say, so this is me talking just personally. I think both of y'all are in the coolest positions. You're doing the coolest work. As much as I personally, again, as a litigator, like I hate not knowing what the future entails, right? I think it is very cool to be in an environment where you can be flexible, where you can innovate, where you can work within this regulatory regime that's changing, but you have a part to play in that change. So I just want to say thank you guys. I think it is the coolest thing. Thank you so much for your perspective. I wish I was a cannabis attorney. Now I just post funny pictures on the internet. So thank you guys again for your time.
Matt, can I say one thing?
Yeah.
I'm running low on time, but I noticed that there was a question from I think a law student.
Yeah.
I would say, and I can't see their question now because it's scrolled down, but I would say to go, I've said it before, go become the best whatever you can be. I would not come right to an in-house cannabis job. I don't know if Charles agrees, but I don't think it's a good idea. I mean, we have 4 or 5 people in our legal department, and we are moving so quickly on a daily basis. We don't have time to train someone to be a good whatever you are. So go learn those skills, become the best M&A lawyer. I think the person wanted to do transactional work. Go become a great M&A lawyer and continue to learn about cannabis and follow the industry, but don't come to a legal department right away. At least maybe go be in-house some other place, but not cannabis.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, do 2 things, right? Build that network continue to network in cannabis, make clear that that's where your interest, but a law firm doesn't care if that's your interest. They're just training you. And I did want to say, there's that phrase, Matt, be careful what you wish for, right? So thank you so much. This is awesome.
No, I appreciate your time, everybody. And for all the watcher and listeners out there, we have a white paper coming out on legal operations. If you're interested, please reach out to myself, reach out to Lawtrades. We'll have it on our website soon. Thank you again for your time. We have a bunch of new events coming out over the next couple months. Please tune in for the next one. And thank you, everybody, and have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thank you all.